Okay, so the other question that I received in my inbox that I wanted to address had to do with the shootings at Umpqua Community College in Southwest Oregon. And somebody asked me, probably because they heard some of my videos before, whether I think there should be um, greater restrictions on gun access in the United States because of these kind of shootings. And really, I'm not a fan of firearms, and probably the person who asked me this question knows this already. I've talked about it at length on other videos, but whether or not he does, um, the truth is I'm not a fan of firearms at all. Um, Although I do think that I'm an advocate for hunting, but but I don't think firearms should be used to do it. I think it's just too easy. Any fool can pull a trigger and shoot something with a rifle. And I do think that firearms are um, more easily accessible than they should be, and that like when I was growing up in the States, I was I was buying a semi-automatic machine gun, something like an AK-47, but it wasn't an AK-47, but it was something like it. And I was buying one when I was like 16 years old, you know, just off a guy, and it was totally legit. Um, like, I don't know. Do I think there needs to be greater restrictions on firearms in the United States because of these shootings? Not necessarily because of the shootings, no. Um, I think there needs to be, like, the culture of the gun needs to go away. It's not gonna, but I wish it would. Howdy. Yeah, I wish it would, but it's not going to. I don't predict it's going to. But yeah, I think there should be greater restrictions on guns, but not because of the shootings. I think these shooting events are a totally different phenomenon. Um, I think what's going on with these shooting events, like what happened at Umpqua Community College, where like 9 or 10 people were killed, and of course the shooter killed himself after the police shot him, and a bunch of people were injured. See, I think what's going on here is a suicide, a form of suicide, and it's becoming increasingly more popular form of suicide among young men in the United States in particular, especially among young white men, but it can be others. Like my daughter, her best friend growing up, her brother, and she's Hispanic. Her brother went on one of these shooting sprees in Portland and killed a bunch of people before he himself was killed. So it's not always the white guys that are doing it, but it is something in that American culture, and there's carryovers that are happening in some other countries. Like in Canada, we have had a couple of these kind of incidents, not nearly as many as in the United States, but it's happened up here, and I think it's just a cultural diffusion thing. It's a form of suicide that's going on. These boys are ready to throw their lives away, and they decide they're going to take out as many people as they can while they do that. So I think, you know, what really needs to be studied here is the phenomenon as a form of suicide rather than as a gun control issue. Because, I mean, absolutely having the culture of the gun where you can easily access guns and ammunition and stuff definitely helps this helps this phenomena along, helps people, you know, get a whole arsenal of semi-automatic weapons that they can bring to a situation like this where they plan to kill a bunch of people before being killed. So yeah, I think, you know, in that respect, the gun control issue is part of it, but it's a small part of it. I think the big part of it is the psychological part and what's going on here, the manner in which this has become a more and more normative form of suicide among young males. And as that trend grows, and it is growing, I think we'll see this more and more. It becomes very dangerous, and it really doesn't matter if you restrict the weapons, I don't think, in that respect, because here in Canada, where weapons are fairly restricted, you could still carry out something like this very easily. You just have to get the right licenses and such. So I don't see it as something that's going to be solved by gun control, although gun control could maybe thwart a couple such instances, or thwart a percentage of the instances of this phenomenon. But really making it a gun control issue alone is looking away from the fact that it is it's a suicide. It's a suicide. It's a form of suicide. It's a shape of suicide that's becoming more and more common, and that's what needs to be understood if there's any chance of getting away from this trend and not having it increase. This has been going on a long time in the United States. I remember when I was growing up in Salem, Oregon, there was a shooting in a tavern when I was in grade school, and one of my teacher's sons was killed in this incident. So, you know, this has been going on for decades, and it's become increasingly normal, right? Or it's common, I should say. It's happening more and more, right? So yeah, so this, my feeling on it is, it's not so much a gun control issue as a social psychological phenomenon that needs to be studied, but having some greater gun control could help alleviate at least a percentage of these incidences from occurring.